Hello, everyone. My name is Jamil Ellis, and I'm the CEO of A Unified Ground, a mission-driven company based here in New York. And our mission is to build technology to empower community-based organizations. One of our flagship products is AI Empower, and it is an open source AI toolkit for climate-focused community-based organizations that we're building right now in collaboration with Haviland Software, CivLab, and NYU, it's the research education center where we are today. I am going to tell you other things you should know about me, native New Yorker. I mean, I've spent most of my life at the intersection of technology and impact, ensuring that we do building tools with various teams to make sure that the people most affected by the effects of climate change are part of the solution. And I'm really excited about the conversation today because it is, well, to be honest, this is a sobering moment at this time. There is not a lot of, with the change in administration, there's been a lot of negative support for climate at the federal level impacting communities. And at the same time, AI has been is rapidly integrating into everything from doing climate modeling to disaster response to infrastructure planning. And then we also have to balance that with AI's energy demands. And there's a lot of concerns when it comes to working with community and being able to use generative AI and other machine learning technologies. And so I think it's that's one of the real reasons that we didn't see enough conversations. So me and that's one of the reasons that Karl and I started the LinkedIn group that we started, AI, Climate, Sustainability, and Resilience, and I hope you'll join. And that's why, because we saw a need for a space for that conversation to go on. And that is all in the spirit of today's session, which is, as I said, exchange of ideas. Very excited about the set of panelists, so I'm going to stop talking in a moment. But I wanted to be able to create a community call and to make this Earth Day something about a call to action, a call to community. So instead of doing traditional Q&A, we're going to end today with specific steps and actions that you can take today on Earth Day. If everyone knows, it's our power, our planet is the theme of 2025 Earth Day. So I want folks to walk out of here with some kind of direction, purpose of where they're going. Something they can do. So, all about community, and I think it's about time that I stop talking and introduce our panelists. So today we have Karl Haviland, founder and CEO of Haviland Software, Andel Koester from the Director of Community Initiative at the New York Climate Exchange, Keith Bourne, who's a generative data science and author of Unlocking Data with Generative AI and RAG, and Clive Thomas, a journalist and author covering tech and society for Wired and New York Times. And that's the short thing. I'm gonna let them each talk. So each of you, I would like to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the work you're doing and where it is at the intersection of climate and AI. I'll start with you, Karl.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karl Haviland. I am the CEO of Haviland Software. And I started the company because I saw that there was a need for organizations to build out AI-capable software products that incorporated artificial intelligence more responsibly, ethically. Companies are challenged to do these sort of things, and there's talent that you need across your company in order to bring that together. So me and my team, we build solutions for climate and sustainability focused companies. Thank you for setting this up.
My pleasure. Andel, can you go next?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andel Koester. I'm the Director of Community Initiatives with the New York Climate Exchange. The New York Climate Exchange is a new nonprofit organization that will be building a climate innovation and solution center on Governor's Island here in New York City. We're a partnership of 48 organizations. That's 12 academic institutions. Our anchor partner is Stony Brook University. NYU is also a partner, so in really great company today. 3 corporations and 33 community organizations. And that cross-sector nature of our partnership is part of our model. We think that climate solutions are not being unlocked at the speed and scale that they need to be And this calls for unprecedented collaboration across sectors, across disciplines. And one of the things that we're thinking about a lot is there's a lot of experimentation and application of AI that's happening in the university setting, in the research setting. It's also happening a lot in the corporate and tech development setting, but it's unclear whether that's actually making it to the community organizations, the government practitioners, the folks on the ground who actually need to be responding to climate change in real time. And so that's something that we're thinking about. We're a new organization, so it's early days, but these are really important questions to be asking.
Thank you, Andel. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Clive.
Hi, I'm Clive Thompson. I am I'm a writer who's been writing about technology since the mid-90s, basically. I guess I wrote my first stories on AI in the late 90s when it was all these things that sort of became techniques that became later part of what we now think of as AI. But I could sort of see it beginning, and I was very interested by it. So I've been covering AI for 25 years. I've been writing a lot about also the growth of the social web and and the way we use technology in everyday lives. And in the kind of last 5 years, I've been writing a lot more about energy because I'd actually always wanted to write about energy usage and technology, but my editors were always like, no one wants to hear about that boring hippie crap. But then about 5 years ago, everyone started getting essentially so worried about the state of the environment that the editors are like, yeah, our readers want to read this stuff now. So honestly, like in 25 to 30 years of magazine and book writing, like 80% of all the stories I've written about energy and environment were written in the last 5 years. And my next book's entirely about micromobility, and like how to sort of move people around without using so much energy. I remain incredibly interested in all these subjects. I read a lot about AI. I'm also a programmer myself, so I mess around with generative AI, like training my own models and whatnot to try and get a sense of what's really happening down in the weeds. So that's me and my orientation to this.
Thank you. And then turn over to Keith.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keith Bourne. See, I've been a data scientist for about 10 years now, focused on generative AI about 5 years ago, before it was cool and when it was a lot more adversarial. In recent years, I worked for a company called Johnson & Johnson. They have like over 10,000 data scientists. And so what we were doing is we were developing a modular generative AI platform that allowed them to kind of piece together different solutions for the different projects they were working on. We were looking at like finding new molecular structures, streamlining clinical studies, and helping scientists respond faster to like government agency inquiries and things like that. So just a lot of cool ways to help improve the organization at a large scale. Now I've been working for about the past year for a fintech startup called Magnify, and we're building like a next generation agent that focuses on helping individual investors like tap into all the data that's out there to help them make better investment decisions, and kind of give them help get them up to the same level as a professional investor. And then last, I've written a book published late last year with Pack Publishing. It was the first one focused on generative AI and RAG, and that's done well. We've gotten to the high top 10 in AI and data science and data category on Amazon. So I just think that's reflective of sort of the appetite for this kind of technical work in the field. And then last, I'm going to say I work with Karl on some of the projects he's working on that are climate focused, and I think that's where sort of my perspective on this comes from. And we've worked on some pretty cool projects. I don't think I can talk any about them from an NDA standpoint, but it's really interesting. Like it's like the impact of what the work you do versus the impact of the AI you're using and it has on the environment. So it's nice to be on the side of the climate, helping climate with AI.
That's a great segue. So we're gonna so the format of today is we're gonna we have a couple key questions kind of to guide the conversation. And so we're gonna jump right in. So clearly the big question is, does AI help or harm sustainability? I think clearly as someone who is banking on using AI to help climate, I'm walking the line. And there's a lot of elements to that. So we have a couple of guiding questions here, and we're going to share this slide deck right after. but I'm going to turn it over. So I'll start with you, Karl, as we look at these key questions here. What AI with climate, like where do you when you're thinking about the question, where should we start the discussion?
Yeah. So does AI help or harm the sustainability sector and your climate missions? And that is a big dilemma because the field of AI is not exactly doing itself any favors at the moment.
Yeah.
Every model that comes out tends to be more energy hungry, more data hungry. It uses more resources. And so when we think about sustainability and being climate friendly, we think about conserving these resources and optimizing for them, maybe even lowering. We have not done that as a field yet. And a lot of it comes down to the methodologies of how we build the models themselves. There are a couple of projects that are out there that we can get into them a little bit later, but the idea is that in order for us to feel like we're helping our sustainability cause, we have to turn a few things around. Number one, we have to use these models in a way that are going to solve large-scale sustainability problems that you can only do by using large data models. And then secondly, as these large models are being created, we probably need to, there are teams that are much smarter than myself that are working on different ways to build out the models so that it requires less CPU, less GPU, less electricity, less water, less resources in order to make them.
Let's dive into a little bit more. Like, what is maybe? So there is both energy and water, and there's different phases in it. You have what happens when they're creating the models, which isn't so transparent, and there's lots of water use. I know, Clive, you've written something on water.
I mean, if you want to, yeah, the big picture, I think with energy use and climate is, I mean, it's one of those frustrating things where you say, well, is it hurting or is it helping climate? Then the answer is yes. It definitely. So on the upside, there's like Karl was just saying, there's all these ways that you can use AI to really significantly make things better for clean energy. For example, like MIT did a study of like solar panels and using visual AI to sort of orient them dynamically towards the sun, and based on weather conditions and weather predictions, and like literally getting like 20% more energy out of a solar array, and that's a non-trivial increase, right? You see the same type of thing with wind farms, like using different forms of AI. And I'm going to preface this by saying there's a lot of different types of AI that are not just large language models. When I say AI, I'm often talking about things that aren't large language models that bring us these beneficial goods. Anyway, so putting wind farms in the right place, learning how to optimize the way the grid works. So, for example, right now, if you've got renewable energy and you're not optimizing the way the grid's being used, you might have to turn on your coal burning engine at some point in time and produce a massive amount of carbon because you didn't optimize the way you were moving energy around. There's studies done now that are looking at by the International Energy Agency that are realizing, well, if we got much better at this and you don't have to turn on that dirty fuels, you can save on the orders, we're talking like 1 to 2 to 300 terawatts of juice, which is just a mammoth amount. Like that's actually more than they're predicting to use for large language models over the next 5 years, right? So now that you have to do that stuff, right? You have to and that's a lot of political will and policy, like saying, well, these great things we can do with this AI, we have to actually incentivize that. We have to make it financially beneficial to do it, and maybe financial hurtful if you don't do it, right? So these are great things you can do with AI. Now, the downside's exactly what you talked about. They're using an awful lot of energy. we were talking about water. Yeah, I wrote a post, because what does water mean? Well, when you're burning a lot of energy, when you're like training a model, or when you are asking it to generate a picture, it gets hot. Those server farms get really hot. You got to cool them down, and you cool them down generally with water. And you have to use clean water from the tap. You can't use stuff. You're competing with the water that you and I drink. So this is a huge problem. With the sort of fun statistic is that talking to ChatGPT for like maybe 30 or 50 back and forths would be like a half a liter of water. So there's and the other big picture thing I'll say before I sort of stop here is like energy usage by data centers, by the internet, by Netflix, by everything we do online, went up a lot, in the early aughts, and then it kind of flattened out as we got much better at being efficient in the way we use data centers. And that's a great good news story. We can talk more about how they did that and what that means for AI. But so basically, from 2010 to 2018, you see the amount of energy, the percentage of all energy being used in the US by data centers is 1.5%. And it stays that way for a good long time, which is really cool because we're using tons more computation, 10 times more. And yet they got so good at being efficient, they didn't increase the amount of overall energy use. Then large language models come along, 2008, and that 1.5% goes to 4% in only 4 years, right? So the question becomes, and we can talk about this more, what did we learn about becoming more efficient 15 years ago that could maybe be applied to the next 10 years? So that's my big picture view of that question. Does AI help or hinder climate? The answer is yes.
It's both. Keith, I know like when you're thinking about this, it's clearly, either from Keith, I know you're talking about a bunch of things that Johnson & Johnson, a lot of good can come out of using solutions that could not have done before. So I'm curious, kind of, and Del, on the community side, like how do you think about this at a large level, this question?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to what my fellow panelists have said, I think what we're thinking about is, climate change presents a systemic and existential risk. And when we say systemic, we mean it's multi-sectoral, it's multi-temporal. And what's exciting about AI is that it enables us to wrangle that data, that's the technical term, I'm sure, in ways that we couldn't 5 or 10 years ago with the technology that we had. And that's what's exciting about it, is it can inform solutions related to mitigation and adaptation and resilience. So solving for the problems we have now and stopping the effects of climate change down the road. The upsides are really tremendous. And that's why we're really excited about it. There's a lot of really cool innovation happening within our partner organizations. But the risks are real in terms of both the energy usage and I'm sure we'll talk later today on also the ethical implications of, anyone who's worked with data, any data scientist knows the old truism of garbage in, garbage out. And that is still true of AI. So if you're also not accounting for gaps in your data set and biases in the way you collected your data, and just fundamental errors in what you're looking at, AI is not going to correct for those. And in fact, it's going to magnify and perpetuate those problems. And so that's another side of the issue that we're also concerned with.
Keith, anything to add there?
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm more on this technical side of things. I think a big part, as someone that's using it, I kind of look at it in two different areas. You've got the fine tuning and training of the models, and you've got the inference, the usage of, how do I put this to use and all the different things I'm doing. The fine tuning is incredibly expensive in terms of energy use. What they did with ChatGPT's, the 3.5 and 4.0s and the models are training now, like it's just it's mind-boggling the amount of energy and effort that goes into that. And so that's like one part of it to consider. Like by the time I get to using it, all that damage has already been done. In some ways you can think of it as a sunk cost, but then in other ways it's like, well, I don't know if I want to encourage this, going forward. But then the other part is the usage, and I think there's a lot of things you can do. If you look at the usage side of things, there's a lot of companies, and I think of like when I mentioned I worked for Johnson Johnson, I worked for Magnify, or Johnson Johnson, all the usage was internally. In those types of environments, you're really not using AI a lot. A big chunk of it is like the processing and things like that is it or like the cost of it is like maybe in development and things like that. But the actual, when you look at the actual usage of the technology, it's pretty small. We never really had to worry about balancing our usage and things like that. Whereas you get into the consumer facing side, like what we're at with Magnify, it's a whole different thing. Like you've got 50,000 people hitting the server at the same time, all using your AI models. I mean, the level of usage on that side is much higher. So it's like anything you've done that isn't efficient in terms of energy usage and inference and things like that is going to be magnified, like significantly. So it's just like you kind of take all these perspectives and you got to bring them into like, okay, how does, if I'm trying to think of this from an environmental standpoint, how do I want to, apply that to those different scenarios?
Yeah, I think I want to bring it back to community and then move us to the next question because that's what I do. Bring it back to community. I think that you brought up some good points there, especially so much of the sunk cost happens when they're building the models, things that are out of control. The proliferation of the data centers, that's actually out of our control. It's by certain players, the big players, the gatekeepers. That's where these ethics problems come in as well. And so it's an approach, but it's not a necessary approach to the way to get the benefit of large language models and machine learning and AI. That is an approach by certain stakeholders. So one of the reasons that one of the things we look at in AI and power is there is a better way to do these things. And so some of this conversation is, as you're looking at, you have this consideration about the infrastructure that's out there, which is inefficient and run by now a world where the answer is, drill, baby, drill. But that's not the way it needs to be. You could use, you can run these models and you can train it in a way that's careful. And then on the other side, you have how you use it. And so we can also teach people how to use AI in a way that is less energy efficient. But right now it moves so fast and so much this is opaque. How do we get the right conversation going so that people are confident that when they are using AI, or when they are using technology, that they understand the climate impact? And I'll just end with like it is a systemic what's that, what it's we're dealing with systemic problems and right now problems. The people are extreme weather. It's happening now, and so when we are able to have solutions, I think, and that is where we want to be. But what is the cost? Which brings us to the next question. We got a lot of this. We were at Cornell Tech doing an Urban Tech Summit. That's where actually me and Karl did a workshop, and that was where we had met last year. And one of the things that came up in the workshop is people did start to want to know. One of the first things comes up is once you know this is a problem, you do start thinking about the water bottle question and like how much energy goes into what you're actually doing. And so we have a bunch of tech folks here who have dived deeply into this area. So I'm interested in this conversation. So any of the folks, like, how do you quantify the energy use? How should we be talking about what's being done here? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I am interested in what all of you think, but there are, from a programmer's perspective, and I'm a computer scientist at heart. I've been building software systems for a long time, so that's where like my head goes. There are a few projects out there, like the AI Energy Score. A lot of us who are in the industry, maybe you work with like buildings, and everybody's familiar here with like the energy score of your building, like how much energy does it use? And recently, within the last like year and a half, out of the Hugging Face team, they developed this AI Energy Score, which is effectively a leaderboard for how many watt hours the inferencing takes per model. Now, granted, it's got some limitations because it's heavily based on if those companies who are developing out the large language model releases some of those information. Right, exactly.
Transparency problem. Yeah.
And so I think most companies, I mean, this is probably going to be a little different than I think what all of you might expect me to say, is that it's probably, there are some coding tools, especially that they use like Code Carbon, that you can put into your software and you can create some measurements. The question, if you as a team, if you're not building out like these agentic systems, if you're not built for an average person who's using ChatGPT, it's probably worth your time to think about what you're saying or what task you're doing with ChatGPT and large language models rather than attempting to go out and quantify it. However, if you're an organization that is building an agentic system, is building out deep integrations and chained integrations with LLM, maybe where the software can run away, you should probably spend a little time assessing like what your impact is. I know that like organizations are challenged with, you know, budgets, costs, right? Like you're only working with like limited capital, but there are some tools that can help you to take those steps. But I have found like there's been a study out of Lancaster University where they did like some simple measurements between different words that were used in the prompts. And I thought this was really interesting. It's well known like classification tasks are a lot less energy intensive than generation tasks. And what that means is, hey, I want you to classify this cup as like what color is it? Or, you know, it's white. And that's it. Opposed to please write a story about this cup. And you're generating something that's far more energy intensive. There's a lot more thought process going into it. You can think of it. But I'm interested, like what you think.
Well, I mean, like if the question is, you know, right, should we measure how we're using this and how we're creating it? I mean, again, the answer is hell yes, because only by understanding the best we can how the AI is trained and generated and how we use it can we get a sense of what's actually happening. I mean, in one sense, this is what we're getting here, though, in a very interesting ways, though, the classic sort of environmental argument, which is presented as an either or, but it's usually a yes and, which is, you know, is it more important to moderate our own individual behavior or that of large industrial producers, right? Is it important for us to like not use plastic straws, or for us societally to sort of ban the mass over-reliance on plastic, right? So you could say, well, you know, are there things we can individually do with AI to have a lower footprint? Certainly, you know, one, for example, is, you know, image generation is like Hugging Face study found this, literally 1,000 times more energy usage than generating text. And also the images are ugly, right? So like, you know, what are we doing? Burning the planet to create these aesthetic monstrosities? Like what's wrong with you? Don't make images with AI.
It's so
right. Just
sometimes.
stop right there. Now, text on the other hand, so you're using a lot, yes, and like you could actually, you know, that text manipulation can actually improve the world. Like, you know, I talked to a bunch of these models and did research to try and grapple with this question. I'm using that to try and make the world a better place, as opposed to like, you know, putting hideous pieces of unart into the world. So yeah, are there things we can do individually? 100%. But you know, the real big work is at the level of the people producing the AI, you know, and encouraging or requiring them to be more parsimonious in the way that they use energy and to seek greater energy efficiencies. The marketplace does a little bit of this, right? Like, you know, when I talked earlier on about how like you know, there was this remarkable efficiency moment with servers. You know, you go back to for like when the internet, in the social internet first comes along in like 2000 to like 2005, people are posting pictures online and they're blogging for the first time, and a lot of newspapers and websites are going. There's a huge amount of activity. People are putting all these servers online. And so you just see this massive increase in the amount of energy being used by servers. But that what happens is all those guys making servers, and they were mostly guys, said to themselves, we're going to go broke paying for all this energy. So we have to get more efficient in the way we use it. And the market basically, kind of forced them to flatten things out so that now they, from 2005 to 2000 and around, 2018, they add tons more compute. They're doing tons more stuff. They're doing Facebook, they're doing Reddit, they're doing everything. And yet they're still using basically the same percentage of the overall pool of energy in the US. So the marketplace will do that to some extent, I think, with generative AI. It already is. Microsoft literally just canceled a bunch of contracts for new server farms, and they realized, it's going to cost a lot of money, and the juice may not be worth the squeeze here. Like, I'm not sure there's any actually money to be made. But I think, and I'd be really interested to hear everyone's thoughts on what are the policies, what are the laws ranging from local to state to federal that we could look at passing that would, sort of also incentivize companies to get more serious about efficiency, because we're now seeing the same thing we saw in the early beginnings of the internet, this massive increase in, we're seeing that with large language models. So theoretically, maybe there's a way to, through carrot and stick, to flatten that out.
Right.
But I'd be interested to know, since you're talking about community is public policy. It is people in a city saying, let's pass a rule that says, if you want to do generative AI here, you've got to do this. At a state level, doing that. At a federal level, what are those policies? I don't really know. I'm not that much of a policy person. I'd like to hear people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing in the last year or so, we're seeing a growing, and in some cases just by necessity, of pushback from local governments and utilities because of this exorbitant energy usage. Again, this is an interesting moment where different well-intentioned policies kind of crash together as we try to move off of fossil fuel usage in our cooling, in our heating. We're increasingly electrifying everything. That puts increased pressure on the electrical grid, and that is running smack into this increased usage from data centers. And so I think the reality is in addition to the business imperatives, it's incumbent on state and local governments, and businesses should ideally get ahead of it to start implementing some regulations and policies that either incentivize and or cap usage, charge additionally for excessive energy usage, because it's not, the reality is that the grid takes a long time to build out. This is physical work, and we are having a really hard time keeping up. And this was even before the current administration started to shut down a lot of renewable energy development and grid development. And so, we can't be making these choices between whether or not the lights are on, or we're generating ugly images on the internet.
I think, Keith, anything to add before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I guess just highlight the positive parts of what I've seen in the industry is just that, right now I feel like we do have to account for the fact that this is still relatively new. These generative AI models like ChatGPT and things like that, we're still really early in the game. I think from my perspective, I think like a big part of this is continuing to drive the industry in a way that is more, energy effective and things like that. But I mean, some of the promising things are that like there's better fine tuning approaches now, like LoRa, that are, they only fine tune a part of the model that's the most important part of the model, and therefore the cost of doing that fine tuning is much lower. There's newer models like DeepSeek that came out, which was essentially they're kind of like ripping off ChatGPT and other big models that spend a lot of money, and they essentially compacted all of that knowledge into a smaller model. But from a technical standpoint, that's a great thing, because now you have a smaller model that's just as effective as the larger model, which has a smaller energy footprint. And it's like you see these trends in the industry. I don't think we're seeing a lot of the benefits that we can get from that yet, but you see how it could go in a positive way. So I think a big part of this is just really kind of pushing people to continue to go that direction and making sure, hey, like use a smaller model that's just as smart. It's more energy effective, and use a fine tuning approach that's better. And DeepSeek's training approach it was genius. Like from a technical standpoint, the way they, procured their knowledge from other models and then but compacted it in a much smaller model is really a great technical achievement that will help us from an energy effectiveness standpoint. So I think that that's just kind of that perspective from I guess more of a positive spin on it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say well, go ahead because I'm gonna bring back to community.
I was just going to say, like, there's two other really quick points. One is like, I said earlier on that not all AI is large language model AI, right? And I mean, a lot of AI that's being used every day that's delivering huge value for individuals or companies is just good old fashioned stuff, more like a convolutional neural network, for example, which has been around for over a decade. And if you look at the story of training those models and using them, it's been radically more energy efficient over the last 10 years, like on the order of 44x less, or smaller. Like we're talking like we're using a few percent of what you would have used a decade ago to train a lot of models now. How do they do that? They just got better engineering. They figured out better ways to work with parameterization. They learned to not use the entire model at the same time, to use chunks of it. So all these things, all these lessons could definitely be applied to large language models if there's enough of a squeeze and pressure put. But that made me think, even as I was articulating in my mind, that one of the other problems we've got is like, or not, opportunities, how do you want to call it, is that the clean energy world that we want to move towards is one where there is so much electricity so easily available with so little footprint that we simply don't care how much you use, right? Like that's the world where we really want to get to, is where energy is so abundant that go ahead, train your insane thing to produce ugly images that we can violate our eyeballs with. That's not going to hurt the environment, right? Because we have so like some of this. I think the thing I wrestle with myself is, there's what we should do right here and now to deal with the constraints, the amount of energy we can produce, the amount of energy we can use, versus what are we trying to move towards in the future. And of course, every single thing anyone can do that pushes a lever, whether that is individual behavior, whether that is policy, to move us away from fossil fuels and towards renewables, makes these arguments we're having literally go away, right?
Yeah, I think the thing I want to move to the next question, but the two things I want to I think it is important to see the future, to envision that future.
Yeah.
And part of it, when we talk about smaller models, part of what we're trying to do in AI Empower is I think it's something that needs to be community driven. And there are already examples of this. Some of those smaller models of this idea of like, and that's why I think it's important from a technology gap to empower smaller frontline organizations, is because some of those smaller models will come from frontline organizations that it will take less energy. And I don't want to wait for big corporations to figure out the market forces. While important that we get the policy and market force, at the same time, I think we need to be enabling models to be built at a community level. I would love, like, if you have resilience centers that we're building now, you could, run a model that's a local model, train it, tweak it, using renewable energy from the resilience center that has solars and some batteries. That's what what I envision the future. And I think sometimes we have a failure to envision the future as so much of our systems we get locked into, and there's this idea that, you have to go to these couple companies, and like that's not that. There are better ways, and it's not the technology, it is how it is being applied. It is the approach of glut, of drill baby drill, that is it. But that's not, if you turn this into a community, the communities that want to be resilient, and you empower them with what they could do with it to be resilient in this moment, that is a real opportunity. I think, and we're going to have the last question, how do we align with climate mission? And yes, how do we align it with it? We've begun to talk about that on an individual basis. And I'll start with this as a transition from a part of that is, I like the point that you made, Clive, but it comes up a lot, especially when you work in climate, but like individual responsibility. It's like, does recycling matter when the fact is like you didn't make the single serving water bottle? That wasn't you, that wasn't your thing. I think I've come around, especially in this moment right now, with what's going on at a larger level, that we have too many people thinking about individual responsibility. You should not be thinking about your individual energy footprint. You should be thinking about your community energy footprint, and you should be looking for solutions that are at a community level. And so as you align, I think you can align AI with the climate mission if you have a community mission. There is a way to do it. But let's get into questions here. Like, how do you align how are you using AI with a client mission? You have a goal. This is the state of things. How do you do it? What are we thinking, folks?
Yeah, I'll start. I think one of the things that's really interesting speaking to this community, and if we think of, we can think about community in a lot of different ways, but if we think about a community as geographically constrained, like in a very local way, one of the interesting ways that we can be thinking about using AI is we know that we are seeing impacts of climate change that are changing at the hyper-local level. So we know, we're here in New York, there are neighborhoods in Brooklyn that are flooding now that did not flood 10 years ago. Every other time it rains, the subway comes to a stop because all the stormwater runs off into the subway because the sewer pipes are literally not big enough for the water to go. And we actually heard from one of our members. So all 5 chambers of commerce are members of the New York Climate Exchange, and we heard from one of them that has small businesses that are based in neighborhoods that are flooding. And they actually can't access government funding when their basements flood because they're technically not on the flood map because it's flooding where it didn't used to flood. And so I think AI, thinking about AI in a very local sense, we can use AI to support very local collection of data about climate impacts because these things are changing very, very quickly. And so we're talking about, I spent 10 years in the sort of smart cities and helping city governments use data to make decision space. And there was a lot of talk about putting sensors on everything. And I always say technology is only ever like half the problem and at most half of the solution. But you can use AI to make sense of that data and to empower people to make decisions with that data. You can use AI to process and clean that data on the way in, because we all know that that's a large part of the work of this data analysis is just cleaning the data and making it make sense. But you can also use it to help communities understand what their options are. So thinking about when we're doing very local resilience planning, we've got partners at Georgia Tech who are developing some really interesting ways of helping apply AI to help communities make decisions about flood resilience planning in their neighborhood. And I think that work is really exciting and really interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do a plug. I'm now working on an application called Flood Chat, which is a chat that's meant to help renters deal with before, during, and after flood. Because it's something that's very hyper local. So we made the information about your risk down to like your neighborhood and your address. It's multilingual, and it's these are new problems. That's the whole thing. Like right now there are huge gaps in being able to react to this new problem. Places that you think you're not even on the flood map at this point, so you don't know your risk, and there's real opportunity to activate data. That's the way I like. So just want to echo that. I think it does align. It can easily align. But I will turn around.
One of the things that also occurs to me, thinking about this from a community standpoint, is that as you folks have pointed out, right now federally, the U.S. does not have a government that cares much about climate change, and is in fact actually rolling stuff back that's really problematic to me. But at the more local level, at the state level, and the level of large municipalities, those often have governance, certainly in say California or New York State, that actually do care about climate, and they have a lot of levers to pull. So that's where I think actually some interesting policy could be made that would have a big effect, potentially even like at the level of like training models and whatnot, requiring transparency and stuff like that if you're going to, if this is going to sound kind of weird, the model is going to get used in the state, that people need to know, what the level of energy made to train it and say to deploy it was. Be really interesting to pass that in California and New York State, right? In the
That's
same
not
way
weird,
that
though. That's like the vision. That's the future we need. Like other places, they don't think those things are so
Right.
important. AI, when you think about the world of AI and ethics, other places they do
Right.
consider that. Anytime you're using anything using machine learning,
exactly.
that's just here we don't have.
Yeah, exactly. But the cool thing about, again, speaking of community, the value of more local communities is that, in the same way that like when California passed electric vehicle standards, it basically required all the big three to, get much more serious about electric vehicles or about higher, better gas mileage cars across the entire country, so I think there's some really interesting potential abilities to be very creative in thinking about policy that would help decrease the problematic externalities of a lot of the AI we're seeing and optimizing some of the benefits.
I think you made a really good point earlier that resonated with me about the water usage within different communities where data centers are being put. And what doesn't get talked about enough is that some of these data centers are being put in areas where there are like water scarcity, and they're trying to balance that with water offsets, which I think is kind of a little bit of a ridiculous kind of concept, right? Like it's not like there is a possibility to just magically replace. But you can't.
Yes, this isn't like Dune, where we can sort of, put our personal apparatus to, recycle our own urine and drink.
It doesn't. Exactly.
It's not worked that way.
And I'm not on the policy end, but I do understand, or it resonates with me that there are local communities that there are people that it directly affects, and it's interesting how a viewpoint, like what side of the coin you really value, is maybe I don't care about that, much about that local community in Arizona that it's affecting. But if I know that I have access to it, my business may be able to make more money. And that's like a really big challenge, right? Like when you're trying to get voices, and I believe in that idea that maybe like local policy could help.
Well, here's one good example. As you point out, the problem that these cities are having is that what happened throughout the growth of data centers is, Google or Microsoft or someone would come along and say, we're going to build a huge server farm in the backyard of your small town of like 10,000 people. And we're going to offer jobs. Well, the jobs are actually like 3 security guards and a Roomba, basically. So none of that actually, none of that really happens. But on the promise of all the commerce that these racks of servers will bring to their small town, they say, well, we're going to need a lot of water to cool this stuff down, and we want a very, very good price on it. And the cities, get hoodwinked into offering them like a 10-year deal with really, really cheap water. Only discover they don't really get a lot of economic benefits out of this, and now they're having to sell them water at a really cheap price. It's causing scarcity sometimes for their town. If cities, and I don't know how this happens, but if cities actually kind of grew a spine or were enabled to grow a spine through state legislation or something that said, actually, we're going to charge you like a real market price for this water, that is a strong signal to people that are deploying models and training them on these servers. Say, well, we have to be way more energy efficient now because we can't generate that heat because we can't afford the water, right?
Now, I have to interrupt because we're running short of time,
Okay,
but
sorry.
I think that, just to really comment, like, I think some of it is that cities don't have, this is about activating communities. Like sometimes the larger cities have access to the data and things to figure out what the going rate of that water should be.
Yeah.
But so much data is not democratized. And this is another, going back to being able to activate data through machine learning. I would love it to be a lot of folks that I interact with in this space, for using AI for good, for nonprofits, you want to be able to activate that. Medium-sized cities never sign that deal.
Yeah.
And that's one of the levers that the more we're able to democratize some of this power to activate data, the more we do get those deals, and we can. It's another way of pushing back. I am going to now show an AI generated image after you talked all about AI generated images. I use AI generation to show often about representation. So
Yeah.
I often, although I ran into problems I asked DALL-E at some point to give me an African American president, and it said it was objectionable. So,
Oh, great.
yeah, so I ran into other problems, but that's not the real call to action. That's just me messing around with AI pictures. Let's go to the next slide and call to actions. Call to actions I'd like folks to do because I think it's time. So if you want to hear more of this conversation, I feel like we need more time here to discuss this. We're gonna hopefully grab lunch and have some more conversation here. I'm sorry about that you guys can't join. But we're gonna have some more conversation here. But you could sign up on LinkedIn if you've submitted questions. We'll find a forum to answer those on our LinkedIn group. If you're interested in hearing about AI Empower, our AI toolkit to put climate-focused tools, AI tools in the hands of climate-focused community-based organizations, you have a link there too. Andel, you had a call to action for people today.
Yeah, so as we're talking about AI, we know AI is all about data and it runs on data and it's only as good as the data that's going into it. You may or may not know that the administration has been actively removing vital data sets that are public, that taxpayers paid for related to climate and the environment. Not only environmental justice data, but also basic data about extreme weather, data that keeps us safe, that informs how our food is grown, and that preserves public health. And so my call to action is for folks on the call to pitch in to safeguard our federal climate data. Call your members of Congress. There are efforts out there like public environmental data partners that are looking for volunteers with technical expertise as well as donations. Support those efforts. We're in a real emergency situation.
And we'll make sure that the link to that is in the slide deck when we send it out. So important, to be at this moment when we can see the effects of climate change. It's being denied at other levels. The organizations that are fighting for it most and have been, which are already constrained, it's a difficult time. And it's a time, it's always been said climate is local. And that's why I keep on coming back to community. And the importance of making sure that we're able to find those local communities that are doing the work. We can join, we can put our energy towards a better future. And with that, we have just a couple minutes if there's for last words, big takeaways people had for today. I think there's the contact information in it. We don't, but we'll set it out in the slides. But yes, closing remarks. Anything last words that people want to say?
Yeah, please jump into the AI LinkedIn community on climate resilience and sustainability. Stay informed.
Anybody else?
No, good. I thought it was great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Keith, any last things?
No, use smaller models.
Yeah, I think so much of this is about the approach, and I think what I wanted to get out today was just that folks that there is some agency we can take in this. There are certain things in this moment that are definitely out of our control, but we do have agency, and we need to have that right now in this moment. It's an existential crisis that's going on. And I believe truly that AI can be one of the many technology tools that we must be using because at this moment. So on this Earth Day, I hope you have gotten something out of this. Yeah, thank you to I think that's it. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to panelists. I definitely feel smarter. And I'm excited to continue this conversation as we need to continue to empower our communities and fight for the vision of the future that we want. Thank you very much.